we've been covering quite a lot of the budget on the channel over the past couple of months, and we know that the budget is going to be delivered on November 26th. So, in order to tie this in a really comfy, simple, easy bow, I thought I would cover the seven most likely taxes that might be announced in the autumn statement. And we're going to be pulling from this article in the Sunday Times. This is the autumn budget 2025 predictions. What could Rachel Reeve announce? I did a version of this last year, went down a storm. So hopefully you'll get the kind of value that you got from the video last year in this one. Now, let's start with the first likely thing that is going to be in the budget, which is a wealth and property tax. Now, this isn't what you may assume it would be. I mean, there's been a lot of conversations about a wealth tax, be it on assets over £10 million, and it might be a 2% levy on those types of assets. This is not what we're hearing at this point in time. So the government is thought to be considering plans to scrap the current system of council tax and stamp duty to introduce a progressive property tax on existing homeowners and new purchasers. It would be applied at a higher rate for those with the highest value homes. Now, the question that I have here is just this phrase right here, the highest value homes. What exactly does that mean? Because a high value home in London is not the same as a high value home in, say, I don't know, Yorkshire or Hull or Leeds or somewhere up north, right? So where does that get defined? How does it get defined depending on the region of the country? That we don't yet know. We know that council tax has always been a conversation, and how they might restructure this, we still haven't had a lot of information about. But stamp duty has definitely been in the news over the past, week or so, especially since if you watched the video yesterday, you'll know that Kemi Badenoch has committed to scrapping council stamp duty tax altogether if the Tories win the next general election. But that's property and wealth taxes as we currently know it, as one of the options that might be in the budget. The next thing is capital gains tax. Now, the capital gains allowance has been slashed quite considerably in previous iterations of the budgets under the Tory government. This feels like it's going to be an extension of that even further. But from what we're reading here, it's likely going to be an extension on people selling primary residences. And this is going to be important because this is new territory. So, as part of the plans of for new property taxes, the government could also end exemptions around capital gains tax for high value homes, a levy dubbed a mansion tax. Reeves is thought to be considering ending the exemption from capital gains tax for homeowners who sell their primary residences. So, if you've been living in your home all this time for the past 15 years, you sell it, you haven't had capital gains tax to pay at all because you've been 100% exempted from paying capital gains tax. According to this, the thought process is that that will be a thing of the past. If you sell your primary residence, you're going to have to pay capital gains on the difference between the house when you bought it and at the point at which you sold it. Now, obviously, if you're paying attention to this and say you're in London, you bought somewhere in the 1980s, for example, for £200,000 and it's worth £1.2 million, you can really start to see how this brings in quite a lot of money for the government here because this in itself is a huge, huge tax. Now, what is it saying here? It's saying here higher rate taxpayers would have to pay 24% of the value of any gains made from the increase in the value of their property, while basic rate taxpayers would have to pay 18%. Significant increases. And I think, me personally, I don't know what you think in the comments. Please do let me know if it is true that they're likely to scrap stamp duty or they propose to scrap stamp duty. I would almost automatically assume that this capital gains clause comes into the autumn statement because, as explained yesterday, you know, stamp duty generates around about £11.6 billion for the government for the treasury if you look at the accounts from 23-24. So if they get rid of that, well, they're going to have to replace it with something. Will it all come from the welfare reform or slashes to the welfare system? I don't know. This would be a really great substitute, but let me know what you think in the comment section. We've covered this one before, landlord taxes. So if you're a landlord, yes, the rumor is that basically you're going to have to pay national insurance on rental income. And that plan right there is apparently rumored to bring in around about 2 billion quid a year for the government. So if you're a landlord, as I am, that is definitely going to be something that I think will basically hit the pocket. I in a video that I made about this previously kind of questioned how effective that would be because yes, whilst it's going to be a tax that the government can raise, you can't get by the fact that this is ultimately going to be passed on, as it always is, because landlords will run their properties as a business. You're aiming to make profit as much as you possibly can. So this type of increase will only go to the bottom line, to the rent that people then have to pay. And if you topple that in with everything else. I mean, rents are ridiculous at this point in time as it is, regardless of where you are in the country. It's absolutely mad. So when you think about a potential tax on landlords that could end up as a rent increase to tenants, as individuals in society, you're feeling that squeeze in your disposable income because this right here is going to end up in rent increases ultimately. This is one that I think will be welcome. And I did make a video on this, and how this works is mind boggling. It's all about digital creation, money sat in reserves in the central banks, but effectively taxing the banks on deposits being held when quantitative easing was a thing. And this is rumored to raise about £8 billion altogether a year for the government. And if you haven't watched that video where I explain this, by the way, you should definitely go watch it. I'll put a little tag up here so you can literally click on it after this video. But you should go watch that video. It's very, very interesting. Reform, and I don't like mentioning them that much on this channel, but Reform were the first ones to come up with the idea. And like I said, it could raise up to £8 billion. The next one is going to be is a stealth tax. And we talk about stealth tax in the fact that it's not something that is going to immediately hit you and it feels like it's harmless, but actually the impact is quite big when you look at the wider picture. And that is a freeze on income tax thresholds. So this is something that happened under the Tories previously. When the Labour's manifesto, obviously what they don't want to do is they don't want to increase income tax, VAT, or national insurance contributions. So what they're looking at doing is they're looking to extend the freeze on the income tax threshold. So where you start to pay 20%, 50% higher rate tax, additional rate taxpayers, they're going to extend that even further to 2029, 2030. And this on its own is rumored to generate an additional £10 billion for the government. Now, there is a really interesting graph right here, which I'm going to link this article, by the way, go check it out. This gives you an idea of when you might actually breach into the next tax bracket based on where you currently are in terms of your profession. So if you're a plumber and you're earning somewhere between, what is that, 38, almost £40,000, then you're probably going to be safe. But if you're in any of these upper professions here, so IT managers, paramedics, physical scientists, university professors, veterinarians, chartered accountants, legal professionals, police officers, secondary school teachers, social workers will just about go into the next tax bracket, which is, by the way, taking you from 20% to 40%. This is called fiscal drag. So it means that because the thresholds are basically frozen, as you earn more and you go into the next earning bracket, it drags you into the very next tax bracket for your profession and for your pay range. And this, like I said, 10 billion quid is supposed to generate for the government, but it is very much a stealth tax. It means that ultimately, if you're in one of these top professions that I've just mentioned there, at some point in the future, past 2020, well, I would say 2026, 2027, you're going to begin to start to pay more in taxes. The other thing, and I kind of spoken about this a second ago, is income tax. Whilst there has been a steadfast commitment not to increase income tax, and this is what they're saying, they are being urged. And I believe that this is probably going to be one of the easiest things that they can do to kind of fix this without having to cause too much pain in other areas, is to simply increase income tax by 2p. And the argument has been if they do that, but they were to pull back the 2p reduction in national insurance contributions that Jeremy Hunt did year before last, that would mean that if you are a worker paying PAYE, you should be cost neutral, but the government will still be able to generate money in taxes. £6 billion is what the number is rumored to be. This right here, if they were to take away the last 2p reduction in national insurance contributions, is the easiest route to be able to introduce a increase in taxes without people physically feeling it in their pocket. But this means that they're going to have to break party manifesto promise quite hard, and they can't skirt around this in any way, shape, or form. It will be a hard break in the promise, but I think it would be one of the most easier ones to do. But that's on income tax. I don't know. You tell me. What do you think? We've spoken a number of times about the fact that when you consider income tax, VAT, and national insurance contributions, it's about 54, 56% of the tax revenue the government generates every single year. So foolishly, them committing not to touch any of those three, it ties their hand behind their back. And as things are going at the moment, with bond yields going up, and our forecast for economic growth being halved again by OBR, this is not good. They're going to have to start looking at different ways in which they can actually bring in money. And this, again, like I said, will be one of the easiest ones. I know that's controversial, but it's one of the easiest ways, and they can do that. And they would have a good reason to do it if they simply just reverse the 2p reduction that Jeremy Hunt last gave when he delivered his last budget. The last thing here is gambling tax. So Reeves is expected to heed calls for a new gambling tax that could raise upwards of £3 billion a year. That's seven potential changes. One thing I have noticed here is there is no mention of reductions in ISA limits of any kind, which I champion. Number one, I think they just leave that alone, encourage people to save. The banks need that money on deposit to be able to lend out for mortgages. So I think there's a lot of interconnectability or interconnection between all of the policies here. But I would love to know, what do you think they will introduce? Do you have any in particular that you could perhaps stomach? I think a tax on the banks is one that would be wholly welcome. Um, I'm not sure that people would look at the wealth tax and the property tax as what you would expect a wealth tax to be, but maybe that's something that people could get on board with. Capital gains, I'm not too sure. Income tax, I don't know how that's going to go down. I really, really don't. Gambling tax, I think, is by the by. I think if they did that, there won't be too much of an outrage. But you let me know what you think in the comment section down below. What do you think she will announce on November 26th? Of course, we're going to continue to monitor this and talk about this here on the channel. If you've not already subscribed and you got value from this, you found it interesting, make sure that you do. We're trying to get to 80,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We've got a bit of a way to go for that, but we can do that with your support. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Cheers.